Africa continue to experience extremely high rates of violence. The alarming statistics on femicide, rape and domestic violence demonstrate these unprecedented levels. The Violence Against Women in South Africa, a country in crisis report, was released last week by the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation and OXFAM SA. It actually found that 40 to 50% of men disclosed of having perpetrated physical partner violence, and 1 in 5 women older than 18 has experienced physical violence, and also 3 women die at the hands of their intimate partner every day. But to talk to us more about this report, we joined in our studios in Johannesburg by Kwezilomso Mbandazayo, who's the Program Manager of Women's Rights and Gender Justice at OXFAM South Africa. Good morning to you, and thank you so much, Kwezi, for joining us here on Morning Live.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much indeed. Now, Violence Against Women in South Africa, a country in crisis report, revealed so much. It takes a look at femicide rate, that it is 5 times more than the global average.
Yes.
Are we a country in crisis?
Absolutely, and I think that this is something that we've known as a country for a while, and the focus of this report is to listen particularly to women survivors of violence about what their perceptions and ideas and explanations for violence are, and why they believe that it persists in South Africa. So I think the numbers continue to be shocking over the years. We have not seen kind of a good stamping out of violence, especially kind of post-democracy. So yeah, we are in a crisis.
All right, and the report talks of South Africa being in crisis, and the minister responsible for women in presidency says South Africa is not in crisis in terms of violence against women.
I mean, I think that particular quote was a bit naughty by the journalist involved, in the sense that she did say that the crisis levels are there, but the fact that people do speak about violence, that it is in the public domain, that people are pushing, means that we are on our way to finding some kinds of solutions. I do think there are some kind of problematic things that our state does do, and there's kind of a lack of political will. But in terms of it not being a crisis, I do think that particular quote is taken out of context.
All right. But are we on our way to finding solutions? I mean, if we wake up to news every day that women have been sexually harassed, they've been raped, they've been violated, are we there?
I mean, I'm hopeful, right? I think that a lot of people, a lot of spaces, a lot of organizations are trying to ask the critical questions. What actually is wrong with South African society? We are finding that our history plays a big role, and the kind of socio-political context, the structural violence that women face every day plays a big role. Those conversations are in the public domain, and they have been for a while. So as much as there is such an onslaught on women's bodies, I think there is also resistance and agency, and that's where we will find the solutions.
But have we become accustomed to news headlines about violence against women, be it physically, emotionally, or however? Are we being accustomed?
I think it's important that it is in our faces all the time, and I think it's important that it is still as heartbreaking, it is still as shocking, it still takes us aback, because it means that as a society, contrary to how violence has been so normalized, contrary to how it is such a language for us, for people, for men in particular, there's still a level that this is not the way that things should be. There's still a level of disconcertment. There's still a level of we should be better as a country. Because as we know that violence against women in particular is both because of our structural realities, but also as an expression of the social ills of society. This is how we see how sick we are.
Yeah, but the message is, of course, against violence on women. Are we directing them to the correct people? Are we directing them to the perpetrators? I mean, the research also focused on men, where 40 to 50% of them disclosed having perpetrated physically to their partners. So are the messages directed to the relevant people?
Look, I think everybody, each and every single kind of space in society, institution, needs to account for how they prevent violence and how they support survivors of violence and how they enable an environment for violence to thrive. So I think that some of the messages are messages should be directed at everyone, but they should be context specific. They should be specific to particular responsibilities and roles. Schools need to play a role. The media needs to play a role. Faith institutions need to play a role, etc. So I think what I'm saying is there is a lot out there, but we do need a lot more. It needs to be more in your face. It needs to be more visible. And there needs to be more calls for a kind of accountability, strengthened accountability, so that there isn't such impunity for violence.
All right, because truth be told, Kwezi, that South Africa has a myriad of legal protections and interventions by government. We talk of 16 days of activism, but the question is, are those initiatives really, being effective in terms of counteracting this violence? Let's also focus on one important issue of the report here. It indicated that the 2012 Democratic and Health Survey, surveying women between the age of 15 and 49, indicated that 38% of rape victims identified a teacher or a principal as the rapist. Let's take a look at what happened in the Northern Cape, where girls were alleged to have been impregnated by teachers around that school. What is this saying about high school pupils falling pregnant?
What it says to us is that, as we know that, a lot of intimate partner violence happens in the intimate space. It happens with people that we know. It happens with people that we trust. I think that, even over the last few months, some of the headlines in our media have been telling us that some of the unsafest places to be in are the places where one needs to be protected: the home, the school, the church, etc. And that those power dynamics between, say, within school situations, school principals, school teachers, and their students need to be examined properly. And people who are found out to be encouraging a culture of violence, to be encouraging rape cultures, to be abusing of their power, need to account for that. They can't just go free. They can't be moved from one school to another. It cannot be the fault of the young women, as we most often see. It can't be that we kind of brush it aside and wish it to go away. There must be a social cost. There must be many other costs to perpetrating these crimes, so that they send messages to others.
But do you think we have a proper victim-friendly criminal justice system and perhaps victim empowerment programs?
So, part of the report in the life cycle interviews with the women were telling us that the women also identify a lot of state institutions as perpetrators of violence, and the criminal justice system, I think, falls within that. In how the levels of secondary victimization, in the levels of bullying, in the levels of non-believing of survivors who come and report, the ways in which the court system treats survivors also needs to be looked at. So we do have a set of laws and policies. We do have a system in place that's meant to, deal with the scourge. But we do need to further investigate exactly how we can make it more friendly for people to report, for people to stay within those cases, etc.
All right, Kwezi, we'll leave it at for now. But of course, this is an ongoing discussion that we should be having as the nation. But as you said, the nation is indeed in crisis in terms of violence against women. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, there you have it, Kwezilomso Mbandazayo. She's the program manager for women's rights and gender justice at OXFAM South Africa, talking to us about these scaring numbers. All right, it's just gone 7 o'clock.